All right. Up my wire thing, and I walked past, and they're all just staring at me from. I was like standing out there. I was like, "Oh right," and like.
Okay.
Don't start yet. Tell me when the video starts.
It's in the documents folder under Robot Studio, under Robert Classes or something similar. Lessons, maybe.
Okay,
Maybe.
It's good enough. If it's not there, don't yell at me.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to speed through that again. It does need to be in Visual Studio 4.8 right now, or whatever version it requests. So we're going to come up here, add a not service reference. I have no idea what those are and don't want to know. We're going to browse to it and browse to the install location of Robot Studio. So C drive, x86, ABB 2023. You can have multiple versions of Robot Studio installed at once, by the way. Yeah, and it needs to be ABB Robotics Controllers PC. That is going to be the PC SDK. If you install just the PC SDK, it'll be the same name of file. It just might be in a slightly different folder structure. If you installed Robot Studio, there is no reason to install PC SDK. So, I'm going to go ahead and add that and hit OK. So now we have a reference to it, and we'll be able to reference that in our actual code. So jumping over here, I'm going to start adding some variables. First, we're going to create a variable for the controller. So to make my programming a little bit easier, I am going to add a reference to using. Actually, we're going to remove this just so you can see where everything is located. So ABB dot robotics dot controllers dot controller. This means I have created a variable of type controller, and I am going to call this one Yumi. I happen to know Yumi has a Wi-Fi module on it, so I can just connect to it. We can do all our testing and proof of concept with that. So, makes my life easy. All right. So, you've declared a variable for Yumi. However, that doesn't mean it's connected to Yumi. So, what we can start doing is adding in items to try and connect to robots. There are a few things we want to try and do whenever we are connecting to a robot. First off, you have to look for all the robots on the network. And this is where I'm going to cheat, because trying to remember all the steps that go into this, I often fail at. So I'm going to jump into another line of code. And once again, this is all shown in the SDK, or not in the SDK, in the developer's guide. They have a great example of how to connect to controllers, and even better yet, they have it set up so that you can... Actually, we'll just go ahead and do this. So I'm going to copy exactly what they have here because it will work perfectly. And I get to be lazy. And I like being lazy. So, in order to connect to the robot, we do need to declare some communication stuff. The first one we're going to do is ABB dot...
Is it under controllers?
Yes, it is. Oh. I say that, but now I'm starting to feel like I'm wrong.
Is network scanner an ABB thing?
Yes.
Is it a .NET?
Nope, it is an ABB thing. So we're going to jump over to somewhere where I know I'm actually using it more correctly. I promise I was scrolling up there. That was rather weird. Okay, so this is an example of me putting everything inside a class. It's inside Discovery. So mistake made there. Once again, if you look inside the developer guide, it will definitely show you that information. .discovery .network scanner. And we are going to just copy and paste that. We already have one called for a controller, so I don't need to worry about that. This one is going to be abb.robotics.controllers.task. Sorry, .rapid.task. And then the last one will be a network watcher. What networks watchers let us do is anytime an item is added to the network, it will actually react to it. So if you're ever creating a system that needs to notice whenever a new robot's been hooked up to your network, for example, I might set this up if I were trying to control the whole lab at once. Every once in a while, our robots will get unplugged. They will get turned off. I can set it up so that any time that it gets unplugged and then plugged back in, it realizes a new robot's been added to the network, and it will add it to my list of available robots. It's constantly checking the network. Is kind of the idea behind the watcher. For most of the applications we do, we don't need that. What do you mean scanner does not exist?
You have an extra network scanner. You have ABB Robotics.
Nice catch. Okay. So, I'm going to come down here, and while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and connect to that Yumi Wi-Fi. Is Curious George plugged in? Fun fact, this will work on almost any age of robot, by the way, so including the really old ones. It'll also work on the really new ones. The only thing you've got to watch out for is your robot does have to have one specific option. And it is one we get with all of our robots, but if you notice you set up an application and you forgot about it, it'll bite you in the butt. So we're going to go ahead and look at that option just to make sure you guys have seen it once before. So under controller, under options, there will be one called PC interface right here, 616-1. You have to have that option on the robot for this to work. Now the part that'll bite you is if you're working with a virtual robot. You don't have to have this option, and it will still work. So, what that means you could make the mistake of doing is we buy a brand new robot, we forget this option, we create a backup, and we create a virtual version of this robot and do all of our work on the virtual version. We then go to install and try and run it on the real robot and find out, hey, it will not communicate. That's because you don't have PC interface. It will make you cry.
Have we done that before?
Maybe.
So if you buy both options, can you get options added first?
Depends on the option, yes. Physical options are a little bit harder to add. However, just programmable options, it is possible. It is still not a pleasant thing to have to do because you typically end up wiping the robot whenever you do it. So, a little annoying, but still very doable.
So you think that option is just to program the robot on a computer in general?
So what we're doing with this is we're actually talking to the robot, and we are able to control the robot in real time. So it's more than just programming the robot. You can still program the robot even without PC interface.
But in order to have your robot be able to work with
a Windows application.
Linux,
yes.
It needs to have this PC interface.
Yes. It's also what allows the robot to do socket communication. So trust me, you can't just get around it. So, jumping back over here, we're going to create a new version of the scanner. And then what we can do is scanner.scan. What this does is it will run the scan routine and search for any robots on the network. From there, we can actually go through the list of controllers. So I'm going to do a for each. And then sure var in. And I can do scanner dot get controllers. And that will get me a list of controllers that it has found. So moving forward from there, you can start going through each one of these controllers and say item dot and then controller name and say if the controller name equals, I don't remember what this robot's name is, so we're going to jump over and check. The claw? Wait, no, that's the program. 502137.
Is that an anime related to World Green?
Yes. So, I'm going to say if the controller name contains, and I do need to do contains, and typically you'd put the actual name of the robot here. I'm going to do Yumi equals ABB.robotics.controllers.connect. Oh. And then I can feed it, the information from this robot. What kind of connection it's going to be. So you can connect to it technically through Robot Studio still, or you can do it completely separate from Robot Studio. We're going to be doing it completely separate from Robot Studio in our case. So I'm going to say standalone. And that's all I need to do for that. So now the Yumi will get connected to it. Now there's a lot of error handling. If it fails to connect here, you may have to do something a little more intelligent, check and see what went wrong, if somebody already has access, things like that. And I need to copy the name from earlier. So 502137. Come on. 502137. All right. So now that we've connected to a robot, we can start doing things with the robot. So by default, kind of the first things you're typically going to ask, hey, can I blankety blank? You can start and stop a robot. So you do rapid.start. That'll run the program. You can do rapid.stop.
So you could like set the program timer to main and start it.
Yes. Now, the only thing is, just like whenever I use Robot Studio, anytime I want to actually do something on the robot, I have to request write access. The same thing goes for this program. So if I try and just tell the robot to stop, ooh, stop is a weird one. It will let me stop a robot in auto mode without requesting for write access.
So you can't start it without first requesting that access?
Correct.
Even in auto mode?
Correct. You have to request write access. Now, by default in auto mode, it automatically gives you write access.
But it still technically has to make that request.
It still has to make the request. You can actually modify what permissions people have based off local and manual mode. So a couple of configurations you guys will be interested in is IP addresses. So I'm going to come over to communication and go to IP settings. By default, the robot only has one IP address that you can connect to, and that's its private network, 192.168.125.1. However, there are typically 2 additional ports on your robot. So if I go to static VLAN, I can set up the X5 port to have a different IP address. Then, if it's something like our bigger robots, you can generally actually change the public network as well. So there will be 3 different IP addresses on the robot that, depending on what port you're plugged into, you'll be able to connect to it with one of 3 IP addresses. The public one, you get to set to whatever you want. The PLC one, you kind of get to set to whatever you want. The private one, you cannot change. A lot of times, if we're installing a robot by itself, we just connect our network to the robot's private network and do all of our work on that network. So, right now, I just connected to the Wi-Fi, and I automatically connected to its private network. So, we're going to continue as if we're on the private network. If you're working with something like IMRAM, you'll notice that my IP addresses for my test program, oh Lord, are random numbers, it looks like. That's because these are the actual IP addresses of IMRAM.
So there's private, public,
and PLC. PLC generally doesn't let you actually talk to it through the PC SDK. There are ways to get around that, but for all intents and purposes, it does not work with the PC SDK. So you'll see 3 ports, the private network ports, the LAN 3 port or PLC network, and then the public network. Public and private will work for what you need. PLC will not.
Do these 3 networks, is that a part of like every robot, or is that a part of your like PC interface option?
It's pretty much a part of every robot.
Okay.
You can disable the PLC network altogether if you do not have a PLC robot or a robot using a PLC, and it just becomes a private network port. But that's something you can flip back and forth. So to explain what I mean by I can flip back and forth, you see how X5 is set up as LAN? That means private network. I can change that if I request write access to be the PLC port.
And can you do that with X5,
No.
Those are
Just X3 or X5. Sorry.
Oh.
So when you say you can't communicate to the PLC, the SDK, what exactly is on the PLC that you would want to communicate?
No. So what I mean by that is, let's say you've plugged the PLC into a network switch, and you plug the robot PLC port into a network switch. Your default answer is, let me plug the computer into that network switch. It will not work, because the computer will try to go to the PLC plug-in on the robot. It has to be plugged into a different one. Does that make sense? Do you guys want to go look at this?
Might help.
Okay, let's walk out there.
Networking is a pain. It's other than well worn. A little bit. Just a tad. Just a hair. No? 1 hour. Final hour. Half an hour. Final half an hour. 30 minutes. Crazy. Never thought I'd be here. Oh, you are. Indeed. Better greener pastures. Well, better greener pastures, they're not bigger. They're not bigger. What? Better green. Oh my. More green. More green. More green for sure. Are you able to tell the robot to do stuff with the PLC through the PC SDK? Because the robot's connected to the PLC. So can you,
Yes. So.
but that's the problem. Can you tell the robot to interact with the PLC through the PC SDK? So like the robot's plugged in network to the PLC, your network to the robot. So can you tell the robot to talk to the PLC?
I'll show you how to do that, because that's where I was kind of going next.
What would you use that for? Instead of just going straight from the computer to the PLC?
Kind of a pain in the ass to go from the computer to the PLC. I'm in the middle of making my own library to do that, but there's not really any good options out there.
So it's just more convenient to do it through robots?
Sometimes.
I thought
Yes.
like if you wanted to trigger an IO or something, maybe on the PLC, but you are only networked to the robot. Maybe it's a computer that's somehow in the robot's cabinet or something, but you just want to put a cable in. But I don't know specifically where you use that.
There's a couple of different ways you can tackle that. But, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this program, and we're going to see it connect to the robot, hopefully. I'm going to add a breakpoint to there if I'm fast enough. Okay, so it got there. I'm going to step over. Oh, no. We're going to run that again. So, I know this is Shoop's kind of first time going into programming.
Yeah.
So, for that, I do apologize a little bit. Oh, it is called the Claw. So that was supposed to be claw. Okay, this time it connected. I'm going to hit continue, and it's probably going to let me get away with this. Okay.
Where is that name actually coming from? Like the claw? Like where could you go to see that?
On Robot Studio, I can right click,
it's right there.
go to
It says the-
properties, and then I can rename the controller if I have right access.
Oh.
So it's also like an IMRAM when you try to ping all it says.
Oh.
Yeah,
Cool.
I like to name my robots.
I didn't see that. I thought I saw the number. I was like, what is that?
Okay, so I stopped it, and it actually stopped the real robot. At least I should have tried. If I try and start it, though, chances are I will get an error.
But that doesn't stop it, right? That just like guard stops it, basically? Which stops it?
It's just like hitting the stop button on the teach pendant. Not even a guard stop.
Okay.
Guard stop is actually a safety level stop. Hitting the stop button is not safety level.
I think these are for
I'm
him.
sorry.
I think someone else tried to do it.
I'm
But they've been
trying
up
so
there
hard.
for a couple weeks. I'm tired of seeing. Give them to Josh.
So, whenever you stop, you do also need to tell it what kind of stop it is going to be. That is a mistake I almost made right there. So it actually didn't stop the robot. That's why I was so confused whenever I went and looked back at Rapid.
Oh.
So if you don't give it anything, does it just ignore it?
It does a certain kind of stop that will basically result in it never stopping.
Interesting.
Okay, so now if I jump back over to Robot Studio and look at the program execution, it now says stopped. So you can stop without right access, but you cannot start without right access. So we're going to jump back in. I'm going to close and restart my program. This time I'm going to tell it to start. And we're going to see it throw an error. So, fun thing about the start, you do have to tell it to throw an error if it fails. That is a add-on to it.
Oh, so,
That's what your true is.
Yep.
so if you leave that as false, it'll just pass that. And
Blow right past it. So I hit continue. Hey, this isn't allowed. Now, does it tell me why? You don't have mastership. I didn't request right access. Right access and mastership are synonymous. So I'm going to skip over that. Oh no. Okay. Sad day. So up here at the top, I'm going to create a variable. Oh, come on. Oh, why did I do partial? Okay. So what we're going to come in here and do is actually request mastership. So I'm going to say mastership equals mastership.request. Nope, request. And feed it to a controller. So we're going to feed it a Yumi. Oh, man. Am I lying? I'm lying, guys. It's been a day.
oh, do you make it mastership?
There we go. So, we can request mastership. After it's requested mastership, we can then start the robot, and then we will release mastership. You have to remember to release mastership. Request release.
Do you have to release it so it can come back and like do the thing you want it to do?
No. So in theory, it's just like in Robot Studio. Whenever I request mastership, I can leave it on there. The problem is if your program unceremoniously crashes and you do not properly let go of it, it will be stuck in you having mastership until somebody goes and clears it on the actual teach pendant. So it's best not to hold mastership unless you need it.
Because if there's an error, it has to result in who you're working on it from.
on the robot you're working on. So like right now,
But you won't have a master ship to work on.
correct. So you've got to go manually like restart the robot generally. So you want to release it if you can. So we're going to hit start. I did, yeah. I'm going to hit continue because I know it'll connect this time. And it threw another error because I still have mastership on Robot Studio. Fun fact, if you were using the PC SDK and you're doing Robot Studio at the same time and you make a mistake, oh no, mistakes were made, guys. It'll actually pause Robot Studio. So Robot Studio came to a halt because I was using the PC SDK. Okay, now I can hit continue. This time it should actually start it. And now if I go back to Robot Studio, you'll see it says the robots are running. So you are able to start and stop robots. Now, you're asking about I.O. Are you not using any I.O. in your program right now?
No.
Okay, so I.O. is a little bit more difficult, but extremely useful. So we're going to come in here and start looking at these. First thing about I.O. is in order for the computer to actually use it, as in write to it, set the values, the access level needs to be set to all. The computer can read every I.O., but it can only write to I.O. that are set to all. So, the first one I'm going to start with is, I want to find one that I won't cause myself problems with.
Is that why sometimes when I'm trying to write to I.O. using Robot Studio, it blocks me and I can only write it to it with using the teach menu?
Correct. So if you change the I.O. definition to all, now keep this in mind.
Yeah.
This means somebody can do it without write access. So if I come in here, I can start playing with signals. I have not requested write access to this robot at all. We have this DOEGM gripper L. Oh Lord, alphabets are hard. DOEGM gripper L. I just set it and I just reset it. But I do not have write access. So try and keep that in mind. That's why you don't just set them all of them to all, because it's kind of sketchy. Technically it's fine, because you shouldn't have your robot plugged into anything sketchy. Shouldn't being a key word. At one point in time, you could access MRAM from anywhere on campus using WSU Guest.
How did you find that out?
Because I used to program robots while I was in class.
So you accessed it from... I thought about doing that in ABB class because no one else knew how to use the SDK stuff. I was like, hey, can I hook up a router to these? Why?
So, at one point in time, MRAM is no longer set up that way, thank goodness. But, in order to talk to I.O., we need to declare the I.O. on the Visual Studio. So I'm going to start adding some I.O. And I'm going to do private abb.robotics.controllers.io system domain and then I'm going to do a digital signal. So this will be an on or an off, and I'm going to call this the EGM gripper IO. I just happen to know that one's already set to all, so I don't have to play with it. Now, what we want to do is go ahead and get connected to that IO. So I'm going to remove all this mastership stuff because we don't need it. And I'm going to actually add a button to our window. That way we can play with it a little bit and trigger it more than once. Oh man, I almost made Bethany very sad.
As opposed to
Okay, so I've created a button. Let's go ahead and just add all of our stuff inside of this button. Whenever I click it, I can use it. So I'm going to also get rid of this yumi.dispose, otherwise it will cause us problems. What I'm going to do is after I've connected to the robot, I'm going to connect the IO to this actual robot. So I can do EGM gripper equals new digital signal, and I can pass it the controller Yumi, and then the name of the IO. The name of the IO, and you do need to get this correct, otherwise it won't connect and it'll actually throw an error. Oh, man. I am not taking the risk of myself typing it, so I'm coming over here where I can copy. And I'm going to put it right here. Now, in this press me button, I'm going to do an if EGM gripper dot value. So you have to pull the value out of it. Equals 1. Else, I'm going to say EGM gripper dot value equals 0. Now, technically, this does work, but it is not my preferred method of doing it, so we'll look back at that here in just a second. EGM gripper dot value equals 1. And just to make sure you guys can see, we're going to do btn press me dot background equals brushes dot red. Okay. I'm just trying to think through in my head and make sure this isn't about to, crash and burn on me. I'm sure it'll be fine. Hit continue. I'm just going to go ahead and blast past it. Press the button. Did I skip something? What did I do?
Not get the actual.
We're going to double check. Okay, it did connect to the robot at the very least.
Oh, do you have to do like get value first?
Hey, make me curious
Wait,
because
how did you get the data? Controllers IO systems and range of digital signal.
that part seems fine.
Well, you might just be getting the value. I don't know if you set it.
It gets a float, so this should be the right thing.
Weird.
I'm just making a mistake somewhere else. I am connecting to the controller, right? I'm not doing something stupid there.
Wait, are you doing it outside mastership?
You shouldn't need mastership to read values.
To set value?
That's getting stuck on the reading. So we're gonna look at somewhere where hopefully I've done something a little more intelligent, allegedly. Have I not done something intelligent here? Oh no. I should have pulled up a smarter program. Just throwing that out there. Oh man. This one I'm pretty sure I have a signal in somewhere. Hey! Apparently I'm just doing set and reset.
I do have a question about the mastership access. Can't you use a using statement also?
Yes, you can.
Do you have a preference between the two?
I personally don't like the using statement, but I'm open to thoughts on that. So what he's referring to there is inside the actual program, whenever I'm doing something that does require mastership, I can use a using.
I don't remember the format. I'm
It
guessing
is nice because the auto disposes.
Yeah.
Correct, but the point is you typically call mastership so many times throughout your program, there's no point in creating and uncreating the variable over and over. So that's why I tend not to use it. Because if you request and release mastership too often, it will actually crash the robot.
Oh, that makes sense.
Or just create errors. It's not so much crash the robot as it is just create problems in general. So, this bothers me. We're going to see if this state has anything to do with it.
It's a Boolean value, right?
No. It treats it as a 1 and 0. Am I doing something else stupid here? I wonder if I'm forgetting to actually connecting it properly.
Connect. Scan. Connect.
We're going to put a breakpoint right.
Wait, did you sign? I think sign on as default user.
Oh, thank you. Well, apparently I never do anything with this one correctly. That's frustrating.
Oh, you just read the values or not read these right to them.
Apparently. Which is very questionable at best. But man, I am too tired for this today. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my other application that should have the signing on. This is probably where the oh, that makes me sad. I was going to jump into the SDK guide, and it was going to tell me. Problem is, I was no longer online due to the fact that I was connected to the robot instead. So, you do need to do a .get signal. A+. So I used the wrong command to get connected to it. That's all it was.
You were using the other one in the other code that you had, so which was weird. Also, it was GitHub.
There we go. So, I can come over here, copy whatever the name of the IO we found earlier was. And then you need to tell it what type of signal it is. So this is a there we go.
Oh, you have to turn your light signal there.
Correct. So I was just using the wrong one. Because while it was feeding the information to the robot, it wasn't doing the rest of it that it was supposed to. What do you... What's not... Wait, oh. Nope, that one's right. That one's right. So it failed to connect. That's what you'll see if your robot isn't actually connected to the network. The reason it failed to connect is I had disconnected from the Yumi Wi-Fi. So this time it connected just fine. If I hit the press me this time, we will see it actually change colors and be happy. So you'll see it went green, it went red, if I open up Robot Studio while I'm doing this and you look at the I/O value over here and I press it, and it's way down here now. Where are you at? That one. So you'll see I'm able to change it from here. So if you're trying to communicate to a PLC and some reason use the robot as the middleman, this is how you do it. For the love of all that is holy, please don't do that though, just because it's bad programming. But that's how you can interface with I/O in a C# program. Do I want to know? I want to know so bad. I love that it has a little mohawk. Okay. Now, where I/O get really cool is you can actually listen to events for
I
I/O.
was gonna ask about that because you can, just like how you have the network watcher, you can also
Yep.
watch your IO and subscribe.
Correct. So I'm going to go a step farther and say, rather than the button changing the color of everything else, I am going to create a private change button color. And then it's going to get mad at me here in a second, but it'll be fine. I can do wherever that IO is, EGM gripper dot changed, and anytime that value gets changed, I am going to run the routine of.
Oh, it doesn't have
Yep, it's going to get mad. It's going to get mad about a lot of things right now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be angry here. The cool part about this is it should. No, it's not going to give me an answer. That's object, or that's evil. Object, sender, and then signal change event arg. What is its name? Signal change. Cool. E. So anytime that IO gets changed, it's going to run the same line of code, except for I'm not going to set the value anymore. And let's go ahead and start this. So now, whenever I come over here to the robot and I start changing IO values on the robot's actually directly changing your UI. So you can make it two-directional.
Sweet. So that's like how we can set up our monitor.
Yes, it's exactly how we'll set up a lot of our monitor.
Event arc or event.
Event handlers, and there are a ton of them. So,
Are there other events on the IO based on or other than change that would be useful?
for IO, not particularly, but ones that you will find super useful are actually on the controller itself. So you'll typically have a ton of different event change arguments for the different IO, but some of your favorites are going to be things like, let's go under Yumi. And now I'm just going to sort by events. So connection changed. That lets you know if your robot became disconnected. Super convenient. You can also do things like mastership changed. Hey, what if there are multiple computers hooked up to this and somebody else tried to take mastership? Operating mode or state change. So state change has things like, is it e-stopped? Is it guard stopped? Are motors on or motors off? Those are a ton of useful things. Then we can go a step farther. So that's just the physical robot. That's like the controller. Now we can start getting into rapid things. You can actually start watching for variables. So if I do, I'm going to create a rapid data real quick. So privates abb.robotics.controllers.rapid domain.rapid data. Robots variable. So I can do a robot variable equals rapid.get rapid data and then feed it something like, now this is kind of a weird way of looking at it, I know, but they want you to put it in as a collection of strings.
Oh, I think I remember Mom doing this because he had rapid code and then he had it like through the pop up whole thing, but this very well changed your code. Just testing it out.
Taking off?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Alright, well. Thanks for all your time. It's fun getting to work with you. I'm excited to hear about how the new place goes.
Yeah, same. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm excited to hear about what the new place actually is.
Yeah.
How do you create an array? I hate arrays.
What are you trying to? What are you trying to do?
An array of strings.
An array of strings.
Is it bracket? Oh, I have to do new string. Ah.
No, Justin was asking
He's asking for me.
about you.
Why? Whatever.
Okay.
What's the array of strings?
So, whenever we look at a robot and we have a variable, every variable belongs to a task. So, TROB1. I'm going to go ahead and open up a line of code just so that we can look at things. Let me find one that I'm actually going to be able to change and not break everything. Camera enabled. That sounds good. Okay, so every robot has a task, which in this case is T_Rob_R.
Are you recording this?
Yep. So T_Rob_R. Then every variable is inside of a module. So in this case, it's main module. And then every variable has a name. So it's those three items that it's referring to. Now, we'll see I did rapid data here. In reality, I would probably rather do a bool. So to state that it's a Robot Studio Boolean, and then it's going to get a little angry at me. But I can fix that just by doing a typecast.
You're my soul now that you're not used to me using.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure you guys saw what that actually looked like. Will it let me do that? It can't implicitly convert.
Oh, yeah. You like trying to?
Yeah.
What does the game
Rapid data. So I should have left that as rapid data back up there and just done that. So we'll leave it like that. Just to make Bethany a little more happy, one thing you can do to make your code a lot more usable is say using abb.robotics.controllers.
You don't want to type it out.
Oh man, it's starting to get a little brutal. So that means I can take away basically everywhere where it says something like that. I can literally just... Oh no, wait, can I? I think that's really the only one I can take away right now. So it makes it a little more clean. But for rapid data, you have the same ability, so you can do robot variable dot, and then there are a couple of events, particularly just value changed. That one's quite useful. That means your robot code can set variables and unset variables in React. The last ones you guys will really be interested in is the Yumi dot rapid domain dot tasks get tasks. And I'm going to go ahead and put that into this right here. We created this variable early. It is just a list of tasks. But what I can do with these tasks now is I'm just going to pick the first task in the list. Your robot can have more than one task running. It's the same as a thread. It's just separate programs running at the same time, or they have the option to run at the same time. And I'm going to select the first task out of that list as soon as I remember how to type.
Did you know that you do task dot first also?
Oh, Lord. I don't like that.
Or you do task dot last?
Doesn't that by default want you to enumerate through something? Yeah.
Yeah, those are good chances.
So you typically want to search for something whenever you're doing it like that. Oh, I did type it out right. Cool. So let's look at some of the events in here. So you have program pointer changed, and you have motion program pointer change. So you can tell if some of these touching your program pointer.
Interesting. What's the motion versus program pointer?
So you remember the fact that the robot technically has two program pointers? That's what that's referring to. The motion program pointer is the one that controls robot motion. The other one is the one that's typically way far ahead, and it is the one that's actively almost always moving. All right, so what other highlights or questions have you guys run across, or questions about Robot Studio, or robots in general, that we can, what are our limits? What are things you think are our limits in terms of C# programming?
Well, you showed me the controller thing where you get to list them all, how to connect that way, not IP addresses. So that was the one thing I had.
Great question. So that's no longer an event, that's a function, but you just do set program pointer.
Wait, with the tasks?
Ignore that. So there are different ways to set program pointer. Some of them are very stupid, some of them are smart, but yes, you set the program pointer at the task level. So I'll stop that. The one you guys will use the most is right there. So what is the name of the module and what is the name of the string? So I can do, for example, main module, and I would run the routine main. And then I would do tasks, or I would do yumi.rapid.start.
And you have to have write access to the program pointer?
Yes.
And then start that.
Yep, those are the two things you generally have to have write access for.
That makes sense.
And variables. All right, what else? What other good questions? So my preference is doing it by the name. I really do prefer the name.
That makes a lot more sense to the IP address, because you
How-
can at least have a drop down and see everything that's on the network.
However, sometimes you do need to do IP address. For example, I'm connected to a Yumi on its IP or on its on its private network, so I know what its IP address. So what you will see me do a lot is this right here. Oh no. Oh, that's what it is there.
Oh, okay.
So if the IP address is correct or it has the right name, because sometimes I switch from robot so much and I don't care about the name. So, or I provide it the IP address or the name and I expect it to get one or the other. And I often get even more, I want to be lazy, to the point where I will do .2 lower, dot contains claw. That way I know I don't have to get anything correct. Or have to get very, very little correct.
I like that all, because it probably makes more sense to someone to see some controller names
Correct.
drop down.
Correct. So you can provide a list this way much easier. And then anytime that you have a network watcher, so I can do a oh, it gives me options.
Oh, they're raising your guesses.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Interesting.
And then I could do something like network dots, and anytime an item is found or lost, I can try and add that item to the list. So, for example, I might do something like this. Plus equals, and then let's come down here and say, oh, you guys are putting me on the spot. This is more of my programming knowledge.
Wait, if you do the plus equals, then hit tab, it automatically.
Wait, you can just use classes now, maybe?
So what I've had to do is I start typing it out and I create the variable or the routine, and then I'll hover over it and it'll provide a recommendation on how to fix it, and it'll fix my routine by adding these. That's typically how I go about it, but some reason this computer hasn't been doing that. So, but that's nice. Good to know.
It's super cool.
So anytime that happens, let's say I were to do something like this instead, and for each item, I will say, I could create a box in here if I wanted, if my brain decided to function. So I would typically do something like a, let's change this to a uniform.
I didn't know uniform grid was a thing until you used it. It like does it for you, so you don't have to put in grids and columns, and it like puts it straight and everything. So like all that time overlapping, so be like, oh, this one's in this one, this one. But and you can say how many rows and columns, and it'll automatically like move it in the best way. Yeah, and it's dumb because I didn't know that existed. You mean like scaling? Yeah, grids are like grid scale, so yeah.
Do you know a quick way to empty all items in a combo box?
That should be clear.
Ha! I actually didn't know that. That is beautiful. So for each controller that it finds on the network, we will do a CMB combo box dot controllers dot items dot add new.
You could just do
Well, let me get away with that. No, no, it won't. Son of a.
Can you just add the name as a string? Just like directly to the string. Like item dot controller name.
We're gonna find out. I actually don't know.
Robert, you're not making a view model and doing binding? That's
Look, I ain't
sad.
that fast. Okay, so anytime an item on this network is found or lost. Oh, thank goodness. Thought it was going to make me create a new one. So I'm going to get rid of all this weird connection stuff down here because I don't want it to try and connect to a robot it can't find necessarily. I'm going to hit start. Uncheck mark that. Hit continue. Did I actually run scan earlier? Did it even run this is the better question. Oh, the thing is I added the description after the scan. So I'm going to hit disconnect. It's running it. That's fine. I'm going to connect to the robot again. And this time it should actually see it. The claw. And if I connect to another robot, if that's not his password, I'm going to be pissed. The robot's not turned on?
No. I was about to say, I don't think that one has power because it's sitting right there. It has nothing plugged into it.
Then who has the Wi-Fi?
That is a great question.
Well, you guys have slowly taken away my Wi-Fi, so I only have Yumi. But the point is, you'll see it goes from nothing to the claw. So that's a way to create a list of robots you can connect to. So if we wanted to create an application that we use for testing all of our robots, make sure that they work properly, we could build it inside here and just have it, hey, plug in, and it'll automatically find it. However, on fixed installation cells, that doesn't make a ton of sense. All right, what else you got for me? What other questions? You can find robots, you can set variables, you can actually change configurations on the robot. So, for example, after you've connected to the robot, you can go to Yumi configuration dot read write, and you can choose which string to read, which string to write, and you can actually rewrite robot configurations.
How do you turn the motors on?
So Yumi dot state equals controller dot motors on.
And would you have to have write access for that too?
Yes, this is questionable.
You can't do auto prompt, right?
No, that is a no-go.
I was gonna say like
Even motors on is questionable.
someone it's an e-stop, does that mean you can like
No, you cannot. You can clear an e-stop though.
oh yeah. But you oh yeah, I remember you told me a question about that.
how I typically end up clearing an e-stop. So this is where you start getting into a mixture of clearing an e-stop you actually do with an IO. So under configuration, what you can do is go into IO system, and we're going to set up a system input. So the system input, I'm going to request write access, can be tied to something like emergency stop reset, reset emergency stop. And the signal name can be whatever DI or DO you want it to be. So, because I can set DOs from my application and have that DO trigger an emergency reset, I can now have my application trigger an emergency reset. So, I do highly recommend looking at the system inputs and system outputs as an easy way of getting extra information from the robot. Because now I can get things like I can trigger a backup on the robot just by setting an IO. I can motors off. I can motors on. I can load programs. And sometimes it's easier to do that with an IO than it is with the robot command or with the command in the SDK. So it's a little bit easier-ish. A few other ones is you can restart. Don't worry about the right access thing. It gets into weirdness. And there's all sorts of other nice ones. You can also trigger interrupts based off of IO. So we get the robot code to instantly do something else instead. Same system outputs are generally good for getting information to your application. So if we go to statuses, you can tie it to things like, now a lot of these you'll notice you have access to by default. For example, auto mode, that's actually inside of robot state or robot operating mode that we were looking at earlier. But you can get information on, hey, is it limited? Did somebody deactivate my unit? Somebody moved my program pointer. That one's common if we really hate people. Once again, you can get a lot of these from the SDK, but sometimes it's easier to pull in an IO than it is to create the variable needed to actually get this information.
If someone like put an e-stop though, like it's push the button and do like 50 things out of e-stop, when they have to go in.
It will not clear it until they twist. So the order of operations is, let's say they hit the e-stop, they have to twist it first before it can be reset.
But that way, if you have something on your UI to clear an e-stop after they physically pull the e-stop back out, they don't have to go into the robot, like teach pendant and buttons there, they can hit a button and clear it.
Precisely.
Because like on the HMI algorithm, we have it to where if you hit it, it'll clear e-stops on all the robots. You know,
Yes.
is there anything on that yet?
Oh, is that what that does?
The e-stop reset button? Oh, it's now inside of here. That's why I added the PLC code. Oh, by the way, we now have a library for PLCs. At least partially. Wait, never mind. You don't have access to it. It's mine. He is. Until it's done, you don't get it. You don't get a look at it. Because I know what happened to Bethany.
Oh, come on. The videos exist. There's a library that exists.
Uh-huh. Whenever I have a chance to edit it and I'm proud of it, then you get to see it.
I prefer to publish it as a
What's the
library.
difference
so Robert
between
has to
like
talk to me.
after
Mir
hours?
library is good. It's the AMR library. That's a freaking nightmare.
So on the motors on part of it though,
Yes.
why is this even allowed if it's bad to do? Because that seems dangerous.
Because
Maybe you should.
the TeachPNet is running nothing more than a Windows computer.
Mhm.
And they're actually running the exact same code here that they run on that.
But like they can't turn motors on from the teach.
On the newer robots, there's no longer a motors on button. It is on the TeachPNet. On the Yumis, it's on the TeachPNet. On our new robot, it'll be on the TeachPNet.
In a lot of cases, people don't use the stop. They like
So, most of those robots actually come with a bypass plug, so you can physically unplug the TeachPNet entirely and plug in an e-stop bypass, so that the TeachPNet e-stop doesn't matter either.
Oh, you said the jumper basically.
Yep.
So you could have like an HMI computer or something with your
That completely controls it.
Can you restart the robot in this code, or is that the same thing that you're kind of showing?
My preference is to typically do it with the IO, but I am sure that Yumi.control.
We can still do it.
Ooh, what was the restart and date for something?
As long as we use the wires length is very
That's nice.
so
Interesting.
you can use that repeating feature to line it up.
You can also restore a backup.
What's check restore?
So if you want to drive it from the center hub, we'll have to make more changes to this.
See if the restore succeeds. So by default, a backup can fail to restore. So this will return a true false depending on if it succeeded or failed. And gives you a little bit more of a way to react. If I had to guess, if restore fails, it actually causes an error versus just returning a true false.
I guess that goes back to like if you had a teach and then you could try to restore something that like pop up a message.
Yep.
Sort of. Interesting.
So once again, that's exactly what they're using out there. So you can rewrite the ABB teach pendant in here. You can actually go as far as to copy their window altogether. They give the option to copy the teach pendant.
Is there a way that you can get like? Oh wait, no, I think I already asked this once, but is there a way you can like get the virtual like robot thing inside this? So like you could get like basically a picture of the robot like moving.
Oh, like Robot Studios, their image of what the robots do.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Like, inside of
It's like a UI thing.
Yes and no. You could, in theory, at that point, you're getting more into the Robot Studio SDK rather than the PC SDK.
Oh, that's
Yeah. In which case, yes, you can embed a virtual controller inside your application if you wanted to. But at that point,
Robot Studio SDK, done much with it?
I built the plasma cutting add-in. I remade the machining add-in. I built a laser tracker add-in so we can actually do measurements and have them show up straight in Robot Studio.
Right. You've done lots of add-ins, but haven't done.
That's most of what the PC SDK or the Robot Studio SDK is. I mean, yes, you can trigger things directly, but
I guess I took that as there was more beyond the add-ins we've done.
I mean, I guess I've done a collision model, so I had my program open up Robot Studio, open up a virtual robot, run the robot, and then return a value based off if there was a collision or not.
Okay.
But at that point, I've got my application open and Robot Studio open.
I guess a lot.
So why not just put it inside of Robot Studio?
See, I'd rather that Robot Studio inside ours. That way we get more control. But that's harder.
It just looks ugly because you've now taken the Robot Studio UI.
I don't want
And-
the user to look at it. I want it to be. I want our program
Oh.
to like back it, communicate.
Yeah, we've done that. But Robot Studio's UI generally looks better until they did the bullshit they've done now.
Sure. I was gonna say, is it a hot take to say that I actually like how this looks better than the old one?
Fuck
That is
you.
a hot take.
I do not like you.
I don't actively use Robot Studio.
This is
So
the
like,
first time I've seen it, and it is visually appealing.
It's garbage.
It's so
I
like
make no statements on function.
there is no
it's so
soul.
vague.
There's no
If
soul.
you are actually trying to like use this fast, you're like, wait, all of these look the same.
They do.
It's the same problem Google has. It's the same problem 3D Experience has now. They all look the same.
Like, if you look
Okay.
at
Colors
like,
would be nice. Back
everybody-
on some of them.
Yeah.
If you have colors, please.
Because, like, this is a man wearing a hat. At first glance, that looks like a man wearing a hat.
Use your eyes check.
an authentic.
I'm moving fast. Like, I'm looking at things and they're blurry.
And it's authentic. He's lost his hat. His type is S, so he's not safe anymore. He's in danger.
Tell me that looks like a flex pendant.
It's very good for colorblind accessibility.
Colorblind still means they can see shades.
It's kind of like, I guess, like V5 looks super cool. I feel like.
Yeah,
It's got character.
Even Visual Studio has
It does. It's got very like dusty character.
Yeah,
It's
and
scary.
it looks like the type of thing that we
Look, the buttons have colors.
I know.
Yes. And they actually look like the things they're supposed to
I
represent.
agree, it's not the best UI.
Well, all the Google icons look identical now.
Yes.
Yes.
God awful.
talk about actual accessibility issues.
Wait, what?
All Google, they update all their icons and they all look identical now.
What?
Like,
Vertical icon.
like for like that.
Glance at that.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm scrolling through my phone, they're useless now.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan.
I feel like that.
So do you like the square or the slightly different square or the other
Or
square?
the triangle on it now.
Okay, but the meat one is good.
That's male.
No. The
Google Meet, as in like.
Google meat.
Oh, I
Because
thought
it
you
matches
meant
the
like
colors.
like meat, like
It matches
yeah, like
the color scheme that looks
Yeah,
like
I
something
agree,
different.
It's so hard.
Look!
To stay up. You have to like put extra.
Oh my god, that's the ducks?
I
Yeah.
hate that they changed
Yeah, they screwed up dogs.
Oh.
If they were all unique enough but kept the color scheme.
They screwed up count. No. The problem is you limit your color scheme. You limit how fast I can scroll. Give me a hot pink one, a lime green one, and a purple one. And I can just like hit it with my eyes closed.
Honestly, my only issue here is dogs. All the other ones are just fine.
No, I want calendar back.
Yeah, right.
Because that is too close
that
to
is
the
better.
same.
The bottom one, so the one for Reddit is
See? Different color scheme. At least I can I can't accept. No, docs is still garbage.
But at least it's not the same color as.
Yeah, I would accept that docs, but I'm just used to seeing it in an actual like paper format.
so. I guess my opinion has changed now. Robot Studio, the new one looks like trash.
That
It looks
looks
the
so
same.
mean. They're like,
Thank you.
ugh.
That's the only complaint I have is they look the same. Other than that, yeah, like by themselves, I'm like, yeah, that looks good. Now I've got 30 of them lined
They
up.
just kind of like blend together. I feel like
Yeah,
as the day
I
goes
was
on.
so surprised when you had it. I was like, where'd all the colors go? Could you turn the colors?
He just likes
the
greasy.
color and soul
It
is
just
gone.
looks like.
Oh my gosh,
I
whenever
thought
you
you
look.
had a gray mode on. I'm like, turn the gray mode off. Maybe there's a gray mode.
No, trust me, I wish there
Are you
was.
sure? But it says
There is a
it's
color
stuck
theme.
color theme.
That doesn't do what you want.
Oh.
I want to see. What do the icons look like in the blue color?
There's not even a dark mode. You can't even go dark.
Let's see what the icons look. Oh wait, what?
The icons like this.
Probably, but you know.
I just want to know.
Stop.
Ugh. I don't like them.
Sorry to completely just like derail this all of a sudden. Do they just make the icons blue now? Or are they still
It's just
No, it's just the background.
Icons on the blue background.
That's
So yeah, at this point.
You guys really want me to make it sad?
Oh dear.
Don't you do custom colors in this?
What is this?
No dark control.
This always disgusts me.
Oh.
Wait, look. Okay, if they have like the controller status.
If
and all that,
everything else
they
matched!
should
I
have
know.
Who
Why
did
don't they
this?
make it all dark? Why would you do that? That's how something else works too, and it annoys the heck out of me, so I don't. Oh yeah, it's sequel stuff. They don't make it dark mode friendly either. And it annoys me. It's like the one light thing I have.
Random question: what's graphical programming?
Shoot.
No, whenever you're dragging the robot around.
Okay, right.
Oh, good question.
Machine programming.
No, we were about at the end. So, if there are any other great questions you have, though.
I am better than Switch programming, but not by much.
Bethany, are there any other great questions you have?
I can't think right now. My brain's pretty fried.
Because I know there are top secret things that always end up sneaking in, and I feel bad.
I know.
Look, it's not my fault I know things.
Yeah, we all know that shit. If he sneaks them all in, well,
He
some point
keeps
we'll
teaching
know
me
them
things I should know.
I taught Robert a thing though today. So
It was a quality of life thing, that's for sure.
I showed him a thing that he didn't know about enums the other day. That was great.
My way worked. It was just disappointing to everyone.
Wait, did you know about the event thing?
all. What other thing?
So if I need to
Find
add
another
an event,
strikes me.
like
Like controller, like state change.
yep. So anytime the operating mode changes, if I hit,
Plus equals.
Just do that.
it auto creates a thing,
Like a function.
and it created a function for it as well.
What's that like that?
I didn't know that.
You
Every
can
time.
also have it auto create lambdas if you do mobile arrow.
Oh,
It should auto create the rest of your land fortune stuff in there too. And then it'll.
Okay, thanks. So confusing. Yeah, I have some programming things I want to go and try.
What?
So close.
Only when you subscribe to the event.
Do not subscribe to the.
Oh, I need to probably just do like.
Hey, are we doing stuff in your place?
Are you guys going to my place?
What?
That's a you question.
It's more of a question of what time do we do there.
I'm still up for helping clean.
Actually, 5:45.
Awesome.
That
5:45. Because Jen's coming at 5:30.
I'm gonna.
I might home at 6. Okay.
I was gonna go home and take my car to office and then get my alternator. But I'll be there at 6.
At 6?
That's 6.
I'll be there at 5:45.
Alright.
We'll be there for.
Ah.
Do you want me to go look at the electrical area right now? We've got
Hey, Luke. Ethan's already left, hasn't he? Okay.
because like from a Maddie